We are live now. We can start. We can start.
Very good evening, my viewers. Today I welcome you on the very August day. That is today. It is a Sarasvati Puja, where it is one of the very important festivals of Hindus, or rather I would say the festival of this nation, because since the time immemorial, this great geographical territory of Bharatvarsha, has been worshipping Mother Divine, who is considered to be a mother, or you can say a goddess of learning. Today, being a Sarasvati Puja, our education pe Charcha is coinciding with it. So therefore, it overall enhances the importance and the value of education pe Charcha, because it coincides with the worship the auspicious day where we all have a worshipful adoration for Mother Divine, that is Saraswati. My dear viewer, this is Vivekananda, an author, academician, and a public intellectual. I do trust my genesis from Mithila, the citadel of scholars. Of course, I am born and brought up in Kolkata, so indeed I do epitomize the intellectuality of the citadel of intellectuals, that is Kolkata, or erstwhile Calcutta, and of course the citadel of learning and education, again erudition, that is Mithila. My dear viewers, it is a time to quote a very important verse of introduction given by one of the topmost scholars from Mithila. Even at the bare age of 5 years, he had entered into the court of Darbhanga, because in those days Darbhanga was a very important kingdom, a very rich kingdom, and of course you would appreciate the fact that for a child who has not yet completed 5 years of his age, if he enters into the court, which was occupied by all sort of the erudite court members, all of them seeing or beholding a boy merely not even have completed 5 years of age to enter into the court. So they all expressed their surprise that how could a small child enter into the court which was occupied by all learned people. So then that particular boy, even though he has not completed the 5 years of age, but nevertheless he recited this very couplet by way of his introduction. That it goes in this way: Balohang Jagdanandang Name Bala Saraswati Apurne Panchame Barse Varnayam Jagatriam. I am not even 5 years of age, but don't go by my childish age. But in fact, even though I am yet to complete my 5 years of age, but nevertheless, I do have the potential and the prowess to describe the universe. That is the place I trace my genesis from. That is the Mithila, the citadel of learning and education. It has been showcasing the grandeur of scholastic importance, scholastic relevance in almost every age and era. My dear viewers, today, once now, it is a time to introduce, as we know that in course of the continuation of this program of Education Pe Charcha, we keep on inviting the topmost achievers in the myriad field of specializations. And today, in course of one such sessions, we have invited one of the topmost intellectuals from Jawaharlal Nehru University, and to have just an outline of his description. The Professor Dr. Akhlaque Ahmad Ahan is a professor at the Center of Persian and Central Asian Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and a visiting professor at Tashkent, Uzbekistan. So we are going to have a very important intellectual deliberation, intellectual brainstorming session with one of the very coveted and well-recognized professors of Jawaharlal Nehru University. My dear viewers, we have already had the privileged opportunity to showcase few of our JNU professors already, like Madam Geeta Kochar in the past, and of course we are going to have another professor, that is Dr. Akhlaque Ahmad Ahan today for discussing all about the Persian studies and Central Asian studies, and also so many important DARA, SHIKOH, AMIR, KHUSRAW, so many important topics will invariably come for today's discussion. I do welcome Professor Akhlaque Ahmad. And one thing I would like to remind my viewers that Education Pe Charcha, which is being convened or conducted in collaboration with B.R. Ambedkar University of Social Science, which is being represented by Professor Dr. Shri Surendra Pathak ji. Mostly, and today also Education Pe Charcha evinces a huge amount of pride in showcasing, it's today's esteemed guest, who happens to be the first Muslim intellectual to grace and bless Education Pe Charcha. So I welcome Professor Dr. Akhlaque Ahmad Ahan for today's show. And Professor Akhlaque Sahab, I very much welcome you with an open heart, to bless and bless today's Education Pe Charcha. So basically, I've given Dr. Akhlaque a little bit of introduction, but one more thing, it is very much required that Dr. Akhlaque, he has won a lot of very prestigious awards, like President of India's Maharshi Badrayan Vyas Samman 2018, Urdu Academy Award 2011, Qazi Abdul Wadud Award 2010, International Iqbal Award, and Governor of Navai province of Uzbekistan, and all these, because he is also a visiting professor to Tashkent and Uzbekistan. So it is very, very important discussion that we're looking forward to, a sort of electrifying and a galvanizing discussion with today's, our distinguished guest today, Professor Akhlaque Ahmad Ahan. Sir, you are very much welcome for today's Education Pe Charcha. And it is the first question of mine goes in this way. Walking down the memory lane, could you take a peep into your sophomoric days and share your details of your boyhood, your sophomoric days, and how you came to JNU? So it is your take, sir. Professor Dr. Akhlaque Ahmad, it's your take.
Thanks indeed, Dr. Vivekananda ji, for having me on your very good website and channel. And first of all, I take this opportunity to wish all fellow Indians, all the friends, and all the viewers a very happy Vasant Panchami, as well as the Sarasvati Puja Day. And as we know that particularly around the world, and particularly in Asian countries, the beginning of Basant or Bahar, as it is called in Persian, and they have different names though, but it is celebrated in this part of the world. And it is also a kind of celebration of nature and the changing season, and to having keenly observing the nature. Secondly, as you mentioned about the Sarasvati Puja, and as we know that Saraswati is considered the Devi of knowledge and education, and knowledge is also means it is considered the fundamentals of human civilization. A nation or a society or a family or an individual devoid of knowledge cannot progress, cannot seek enlightenment, and cannot understand the world around him or her. In Persian, we know a great poet like Ferdowsi who wrote Shahnama. Shahnama is an epic like ours, Mahabharata and Ramayana. And there he says that Tawana bovad har ke dana bovad, zedanish dile peer burna bovad. Yani the might or the power or the strength comes with knowledge, the wisdom. And the one who has, or the one who possesses the knowledge is basically, and in fact, he or she is the mightier one. And in Indo-Persian tradition, this they have influenced, and in Persian tradition, there is a very interesting thing written by Persian and Arab writers, and they, particularly the geographers like Al-Masudi and others, they divided the world on the ground of characteristic of different regions of the world. And there is a concept of Haft Aqlim. Haft Aqlim means 7 regions of the world. And one of the regions is India. And India is described as Iqlim Hikmat, means the region of wisdom. So we know we had many thousand years of knowledge tradition, and there has been many streams of knowledge arriving and being accepted and being greeted by the Indians. And similarly, we know that even the Turks came in India, as we know, 12th, 13th century onward. But much before that, in 9th and 10th centuries, we see that there was a great center in Baghdad. There was a empire of Abbasid rulers, and they ruled from the borders of India to Europe and Africa. And they had founded a great center in Baghdad that was called as Baitul Hikmah, means the house of, or the university or institute of the wisdom. And they collected and invited scholars and books from around the world, from the Roman Empire and from India. And they got it translated. There were large number of Pandits from India living in Baghdad and doing research, and the books from Sanskrit were translated from Sanskrit into Persian. And as we know that one discipline of mathematics is called as Hindsa because of its connection with Hind or India. And they subsequently, when they started ruling the European world, particularly the Spain and the area around, so they also brought Indian masons from India to Europe. And if you go and see the buildings, you will also find the impact of Indian architecture there. So in fact, knowledge is always celebrated, always it is revered by all the societies who want or wish to progress and evolve. And knowledge means being humble, as it is Sanskrit says that Vidya Dadati Vinyam. If you are going to pursue knowledge, you have to be humble. So without humbleness, you can't earn the knowledge. And therefore, once you are a pursuer of knowledge, you are always a student from the beginning to the end of your life. So that is the thing, and we should try to re-look into this whole vibrant knowledge tradition that traveled from India to Arab world to Persian world, and how they learned from each other and how they interacted. So that was our knowledge tradition. I have been working on this, and I get thrilled to see that how people influence, learn, and respected the scholars and all that. So that has been our tradition. Our tradition is basically Asian tradition, and Asian tradition is basically connected with the whole world tradition. So whatever knowledge we are having, it is basically the essence of the knowledge of the world, and every society and everything. For example, today whatever we are enjoying or having might be created by someone somewhere in the world, in the different corner of the world. So being a global village, and the concept already existed in our own traditions, that the whole world is like a kutum, a family. So that is how we should take. And I really, as you in the beginning very well introduced about the importance of knowledge. One thing I would like to add, as you mentioned about the Mithila region and the Darbhanga family. The Darbhanga family, from the first ruler, I think during the period of Akbar, it was the family established. They have always been a connoisseur of knowledge, art, and everything. The Raja of Darbhanga, very much supported different different rajas in different periods. In the modern period, we see that when Aligarh Muslim University was being established, and it was in the beginning period, Raja of Darbhanga supported a lot financially, and similarly to other universities like BHU and other universities. He had a great library. I had opportunity to visit once, and I found it very rich. And there has been books on Persian tradition also. As you asked about myself, I come from a place, Betia, you must be knowing. I had my early education there. Then I came to Aligarh Muslim University. I got admission in graduation. I did my honors in geography. Then I moved to Jawaharlal Nehru University around 30 years ago. And I got admission in Persian literature. I had interest in Persian literature since my childhood. So I started studying it. And since 97, I started teaching. And I did my PhD also from Jawaharlal Nehru University. And during my PhD, I also visited for my studies to Iran and Iranian universities, and I studied there. I consulted many libraries, and finally I joined JNU as assistant professor in 2001. And since then, I have been visiting different countries for seminars, conferences. I visited USA, Turkey, Central Asian countries. I was also visiting professor. I taught in Tashkent State University. And I have traveled a lot. I also love traveling. I have traveled around 40% of Iran, and almost all Uzbekistan, Azerbaijan, Turkey, and many other countries. And what delights me, that I find historical, cultural connect with India, vis-a-vis the people's love and affection for India and Indians. If you will, for example, while visiting in a remote place in Uzbekistan or in Iran or Azerbaijan, when they see a person like me who is Indian, they ask, and the smile comes on their face. That is very good to see, and that is really very pleasing to any Indian. So that connect must be also
Thanks a lot, Professor Sahab. And in fact, when Professor Akhlaque Sahab was trying to throw an adequate light about the Asian connection, because he says that just now, as he had made a very adequate disclosure about his visits even to the remotest part of Uzbekistan and Iran, and as soon as he would introduce or identify himself as an Indian, Iranians or the inhabitants of Uzbekistan would smile, would respond with a smile that shows the amount of trust and goodwill that even the people in Iran and Uzbekistan have for Indians. But I have heard, I'm not very sure, and I don't mean, even the remotest of malice, that I heard that, if someone identifies himself as a Pakistani, even in Iran or Uzbekistan, they don't get a very, warm treatment, a warm response vis-a-vis that of an Indian, which Akhlaque Sahab has very categorically and candidly he expounded and he articulated, which vindicates the fact that India, because of its ancient culture and age-old civilization, because of the value of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, which I tell you, my dear viewers, it is nothing but it is a conceptualization of Indian Upanishadic philosophy. That world is one, and entire world is bound by an inextricable link. That is, the same consciousness which pervades every atom of the universe. That is what Akhlaque Sahab has personally experienced, as he was sharing his very, very rich experience with all of us about his visits to all these countries. My dear viewers, one thing it becomes very relevant here. In course of past discussions on education pe Charcha, I have already floated this idea, rather expounded this idea about Asian solidarity because of the common bounding about which Professor Akhlaque has been just articulating. That is common bounding, it unites all Asians in a common bond. And therefore, as what he has been talking about education knowledge, which is a commonality or common binding factor between different Asian neighbors. They are a very important, you can say, a sloka or a verse goes like this: the Swadese Pujyate Raja Vidwana Sarvasya Pujyate. A rich man or maybe a king, might be worshipped within his own territory. But whereas when it comes to the question of a scholar is, the importance of the value of scholar is transcendental. He is worshipped even beyond the territory where he has lived all throughout. That is the importance of knowledge, my dear viewers. I'm coming to the second question for Professor, Dr. Akhlaque Sahab. You have an expertise over Indo-Persian studies about which you already dealt, not in meticulous details, but in infinitesimal proportion. You already spoke about it. Now, could you please share the template as well as the background of the evolution of Indo-Persian relations? Please, Akhlaque Sahab.
Yes, why Indians are revered and they are celebrated and India is celebrated, that is because of, as you mentioned, its rich culture, and people wonder how different identities, thousands of identities from linguistic, ethnic or different backgrounds live together amicably, and for thousands of the years they are living. So it is a civilization like ocean where many tributaries and rivers come and merge into, and yet have their own color and their own. So it's like a whole kind of garden where different colors of flowers are there, and they beautify the garden. The Indo-Persian relation, as you mentioned, it is very difficult to exactly point out when it started. But nonetheless, we are historically the Persian world, that is today Iran, we can say, including the Central Asia. Because in Iran used to be a great empire. In the ancient period, there were two huge empires. One was the Roman Empire and another was Iranian Empire. And it was the immediate neighbor of India, always. And there has been always a very cordial historical, cultural relation between the two parts of the world. As it is also mentioned in the different historical texts, and we have, for example, in the ancient period, one of the centers and capital of Iran was Persepolis, that today it is called as Shiraz. When I visited that place, I was very much surprised and amazed and also pleased to see that many of the symbols of Iranian historical thing are very similar to our Indians. Like they also use the symbol of lion or the horse or the lotus and many other things. So similar thing we also see in the ancient buildings of Ashoka and even the modern period. And what we call as Indian architecture. Indian architecture has also evolved, taken from different countries and also influenced different countries. For instance, the temples of South, particularly the western part of South, including even Tamil Nadu, Kerala and others. Similar kind of architecture you can see in Egypt, and that shows the maritime relation between Indians and the Egyptians. That is also old civilization. Similarly, in the north particularly, the kind of buildings we see, it has also evolution, like ancient architecture, and then it also synthesized and has taken influence from the Central Asian and Iranian and Turkish architecture, as we see in particularly in the medieval buildings. And the finest examples are, for example, the tomb of Humayun and Taj Mahal and others. And similarly, when you go to Central Asia, we find that many Central Asian kings invited Indian masons and architects. And therefore, we see the influence of Indian architecture on the Central Asian. And as I mentioned, that even we can see the imprint of Indian architectural style, even as far-flung in the western part in Egyptian buildings that were constructed by the Arabs, and they had it. So this interaction of Indians and Persians have always been there. They were the immediate neighbors, as well as, for example, our most ancient known civilization is Harappan and Indus Valley civilization, isn't that? And it is immediate to Iranian part of the world. And certainly at that time, they had also, I think, their civilization, their station in this part of the world. So that interaction has always been there. For example, we one of the sources of Ashokan period is the relics written on walls or stones. The similar kind of thing we find done by the Achaemenian kings of Iran. And this interaction has not been there since the medieval period. It has been since many thousands of the years. And you would be amazed to know that, for instance, today one person in Delhi or any part of India visits another part, like we go to Hyderabad, Madras, Guwahati, or Patna, or Gaya. In the ancient period, Indians used to visit this whole Central Asian parts. For instance, Kandahar and Ghazni and Kabul and Balkh and Bukhara and others. Bukhara, I found a very interesting place, being one of the centers of the civilization of this part of the world, particularly the Asian part. And we see a great interaction and influence of Indians also there. And we also find the influence of Bukhara and Samarkand in India also. For instance, Bukhara in the very ancient period was center of Maithraism. Then it became the center of Zoroastrianism. And I find it that there is something in that place that is very vibrant and very revolutionary. They have been accepting different ideas in different eras and also propagating it. So I saw then after Zoroastrianism, it became the center of Buddhism. And because of the Buddhist Bihars, it has taken its name Bukhara. Vihara, Bukhara is basically the name taken from Vihara. And then they converted to Buddhism and they propagated the religion in the whole that part of the world in China, and then went to Japan and East Asia. And after that, it became the center of Islamic tradition, particularly the Sufi tradition. And there are 7 great Sufis. And from there, we see the earliest Sufi traditions are coming from this part of the world. And then they are also coming to India. So one of the most important Sufi tradition was Naqshbandiya tradition, which came from that part. Similarly, there was a great relationship of trade, particularly the traders from Gujarat and Rajasthan. They used to travel to Central Asia, and in that time, in the ancient period, as we know, that it took months to go there. So I came to know that they had one family in India and another family in Central Asia, because they used to stay there for 2-3 years, and then they used to come. So there was a family kind of relation also. There is one interesting story I came across. I saw one, I came to know about one graveyard that is called as Kabristan-e-Hindi, means the graveyard of Indians. So I asked about it, what happened, why there is so, so they told that there was one king who was also a wrestler. So he came for one competition to Rajasthan, and he was defeated, Rajasthan or somewhere else. When he was defeated, his companions and his nobles felt insulted. So they left him and they went back and captured his emirate of Bukhara. So he was left alone. And once in an incident, he saved the life of one of the kings of Rajas of Rajasthan. And while he was drowning in a river, I think. So the Raja told, you have saved my life, how I can reward you? So he told his story. So he told, yes, I have heard about it. So he told, what do you want from me? He told, just give me a few soldiers. So he gave a few 100, 200 soldiers to him. And then he went back along with them and he recaptured his kingdom. and made them his nobles. So they settled over there. So that kind of relationship, and that continued. Particularly, we now say that this relationship started with the 12th, 13th century when Turks started ruling India. It is not that. It was always there. And even their arrival from these Turks rulers, why they came? Because they were pushed by the Mongols. So they had no other place to refuse. And they had always heard about India. And that was the reason why they were attracted and they pushed towards Indian subcontinent. So that was basically a historical relation for many, many thousands of the years. And as we know in today's time, that today is an era for last 200-300 years, era of the concept of a state nation or nation state. So then there is border and there is one identity, and basically it is a European concept where there are small states and small based on small identities. But we are a great civilization, and we have been, there were many countries within Indian subcontinent and in Central Asian part, but we were connected culturally, and the interactions were there. There were no visa and all. Sorry. So that relation has always been there, though for last 100 years, maybe because of the colonization, this whole connect has gone away to a certain extent. And there is a need to revive it. For instance, there in Jyotish Shastra, there is one discipline within Jyotish that is called as Tajik Jyotish. Tajik means foreign, or Tajik means Tajikistan, the Tajik area, the Central Asia. So even there has been that shows also that this might have been taken from here. So we contributed to them. We also took from them. So that interaction has been there, and there is need to revive it, to re-look into it, and to know how great our civilizations were and how we were closely connected with each other. And that is called Indo-Persian tradition. When we call Indo-Persian tradition, it means Indian tradition, particularly the Sanskrit tradition, and many modern Indian languages, particularly in the northern part of India, that are the daughters of Sanskrit, and you can say Pali and Abrans and the Persian tradition. And basically, Sanskrit and Persian are the sister languages, Indo-Aryan languages. And if we go back into the history, I teach the different dialects of Persian, and I see there are words very similar with each other. Grammar is similar in Sanskrit and Persian. For instance, we in Sanskrit call sarva. Sarva means all. In old Persian, it used to be called as harva. Then it became har. The meaning is same. We call saptah or sapt. They used to call haft. Then it became haft. So there are thousands of the words and some the same root. And even the grammarian who made this wonderful grammar Ashtadhyaya, Panini, the scholars believe he belonged to the place, now it is called as Afghanistan. And many Afghan scholars claim he was a Pathan or Pashtun, and his mother tongue was Pashto. And therefore, we, in the post-Ashtadhyaya era, we find many words coming into Sanskrit. For example, in Sanskrit, we did not have words for lipi. or likhna. This was taken from Pashto words, likwan kai, likwal, and these words. So these interactions has always been there, and that is called as Indo-Persian tradition. And this tradition has always been there, but unfortunately, since the colonial period, when they started divide and rule, they started attaching languages with the identities, and particularly with the religious identity. That has resulted into a very dangerous trend, and that has basically harmed our great knowledge tradition. In Indian tradition, knowledge was not attached with the identities generally. For instance, we know Mullah Badayuni, a great historian of Akbar's period, and he was a very conservative Muslim, and he is the person who translated Rigved, Ramayana, and Mahabharata from Sanskrit into Persian. What does it mean? It means that people during that time used to know all the languages, existing knowledges, including Sanskrit. And similarly, we know many great pundits and scholars of that time. For example, Chandrabhan Brahman, he's a great Persian writer and poet of the Mughal era, and he's equally a very conservative Sanatani, very religious person, but he is the person whose writings were taught in madrasas. He was a great scholar of Quranic studies, Arabic, Persian, and all. So that shows that whatever the knowledge, whatever the languages you can earn and learn, it was our tradition. This knowledge was always revered, but from wherever it comes, and as I mentioned, even as early as in 8th, 9th century, when there was no Turkish rule in India, Indian pundits were there in Baghdad, in Iraq, contemporary Iraq, and certainly they knew about the Indian great knowledge tradition, their contribution to mathematics, science, and different traditions of the knowledge. So that interaction has always been there.
Thanks a lot, Professor. You already dwelt and adequate, you dwelt at length on the various facets and dimension of, of confluence between Indo-Persian relations between Indian and Persian scholars. My dear viewers, it is very, very appropriate here at this very juncture to just articulate a particular piece of information, to profess or to proclaim a particular piece of information, which was expounded by Swami Vivekananda way back in 1893 in the Parliament of World Religions, where he had said, rather where he had emphasized on this fact that even Parsis, that is the original inhabitants of Persia, who were driven out on account of Muslim invasion there, and they took refuge here with Indians. With us, our forefathers gave them refuge, gave them shelter. And most of the Persians, or you can say the Farsis, they all perished on account of the Muslim conquest or Muslim invasion. Those who managed to survive and sought refuge or asylum with us, they only managed to survive. And we assimilated and absorbed all those who fled from their own motherland. So Persia, which was the erstwhile name of Iran, actually belonged to the Parsis, who basically were driven out from their motherland, and they took asylum or they took refuge in us. And we Indians, our forefathers, gave them refuge, gave them asylum, shelter, and we took to our bosom all sort of fleeing Parsis and people from other parts of the world who fled from Muslim invasions or for any other region. So it's fantastic that you have elaborated on, about the exchange of knowledge, exchange of views, exchange of information, a sort of, bonhomie that prevailed then, among the scholars cutting across the geographical boundary or cutting across even the linguistic parochialism. Today we are, as what Professor says, and I'm absolutely in agreement with him both in letter and spirit, that today we have some sort of parochialism engulfing us in its octopus-like grip. But whereas if we talk about 500 years back or even earlier than that, there was no sectarianism or linguistic sectarianism prevailing then. But today, even our religions have come to be identified with some sort of language which is not at all good for the humanity at large. This is what Professor Saab was trying to propagate or trying to articulate. Thank you, Professor Saab, for your very, for your elaborate response into to our this previous question. Now I'm going to ask you very simply, and I would like to request you, because time is short and we have so many questions, if you could just, truncate your answers, possibly our viewers will get enlightened, on so many different issues. So next question is, since you are an expert, you have done a lot of research on Silk Road region, your take on Silk Road region, please. Please, Professor Saab.
See, the term basically the Silk Road or Silk Route was first used in the 19th century, in the late 19th century. But the Silk Route itself existed for many thousands of the years. And it basically emanated from China, and it has many tributaries from there to Central Asia, to Afghanistan, to Iran, to Turkey, and to Roman Empire. And it also had its tributaries into India. So this route was basically used for travels and basically for the trade and business. Nonetheless, it also served the cultural relations, because people from different parts travel to each other, scholars, poets, from here to those parts of the world, and from that part of the world to here. For example, we know Ibn Battuta coming to all from Africa to India, and similarly Indians going to different part of world. I was in Baku, Azerbaijan, and was very delighted to see there was one Atishgah, we can call it fire temple, that is there. And they told me, and there was also a fire temple, means it was certainly constructed by the Zoroastrians, but it had also Pandits and Indians in the medieval period and early medieval period. So that was there, and that route has connected this whole part of the world. Even the GT road come from Calcutta to Peshawar, and from there Khyber Pass to the Silk Route. So these all were connecting different people, and today there are talks in all these countries about reviving it, reconnecting it, and India is also taking it as a soft power.
Thanks a lot, Professor. You have given us an adequate hint on it. And of course, so one thing I would like to ask, because you have already spoken about it, just seeking your clarification, the GT road which was built by Shershah Suri, which connected from Takra to Peshawar, about which you are talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks a lot. Now, the next question, Professor Saab, because of your exhaustive study and research on Sufism, so I would like to know about its genesis and how did it get its foothold in India. So please, your take on this.
See, Sufism is basically spiritualism, and I have written about it. I won't go into the details, but briefly, I would like to just underline that all the religions of the world have three-tier system. Either it is Islam, Sanatan religion, Christianity, or whatever the religion we have in the world. They have three-tier system. One is faith in God. Basically, religion is always based on the concept of God. And some religions believe in one God, some believe in duality, some believe in Trinity. The Sanatan religion is also one of the religions that believe in basically monoism, mostly, I think. So that is one part of the faith. The second part is on the rituals and the guidelines how to live. So to basically discipline the society, and that part is also used by the states to form the laws and all. The third part is the individuals connect with the ultimate self. First, realizing the self, who I am, to realizing the ultimate self. That is a spiritual part. And that realization has always been there, before Sufism, after Sufism. So Sufism is the spiritual part of Islam, okay, and it emerged even during the period of Prophet, okay. So there were people, even among his followers and his friends, they were totally dedicated to spiritualism, and the Sufis believe that this tradition comes from there. There was a place called as Sufa, Chabutra, we can say in Hindi. And they used to live there always. They were like faqirs and darwish, always remembering God and dedicated, not having any worldly lust or anything. So, but later, particularly after the devastating attacks of Mongols that happened in Iran, in Central Asia, in the Arab world, and fortunately we were saved from the Mongols' attack. Maybe because there were strong Turkish rulers in Delhi, they saved it. But they devastated totally Iranian and Central Asian part, and there were large level massacres, and all the urban centers were totally destroyed. So what happened, all the scholars in certain situation, and we can understand in this pandemic era, that there is a certain kind of inclination towards spiritualism. When we lose our near and dear, when we lose our worldly attentions, then we go into spiritualism. And that was the reason, after particularly the 12th century or 11th century, this trend became a major trend in the whole Islamic world. And then many Sufis came to India also. And they, for example, the Khaja Gharib Nawaz of Ajmer and many others, they came to India and settled there. And they were basically, means they used to live recluse life, to connect with the people, to serve people. So spiritualism also teaches you to love all the living being, all the non-living being.
Thank you. Thanks a lot for your exposition, for your articulation, my dear viewers. Here I would like to mention about the unparalleled realization of Sanatana Dharma. When we talk about it, Gate Adi Shankaracharya talks about, the oneness of the universe, the same soul or the consciousness pervading, across the universe, pervading every atom of the universe, as he has described so very meticulously and so very, fantastically in his famous book Century of Verses, where he says, Mind nor body nor ego feeling, sky nor earth nor metal am I. I am he, blessed spirit I am he. Beyond the flight of fancy, formless am I, permeating the limbs of all life. Bondage I do not fear, for I am free, ever free. I am he, blessed spirit I am he. So what Professor Sahib was trying to talk about or trying to tell us about Sufism, which is a spiritual part or spiritual form and manifestation of Islam, obviously has a great striking similarity or affinity with the very eternity of the concept as espoused and ardently advocated by the early saints of Sanatan Dharma, who could visualize the inextricable link of the entire universe. And that is why they said that Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, entire world is bound by a single thread. That is the glory, what you can say, the broad and the kaleidoscopic vision of Sanatan Dharma. And Sufism, as per the articulation of professors of JNU, our esteemed guest today, has a lot of a common affinity with that of Sanatan Dharma. Thank you, Professor Saab. Since we are running short of time, we have to take care of several questions. I'm coming to a very next question, very, very important question, because, I would like to know from you, because you have done a very extensive and exhaustive studies on both AMIR KHUSRAW and DARA SHIKOH. My dear viewers, whatever we have learned about DARA SHIKOH, he was the eldest son of Jahangir. And in fact, he had, Shahjahan, and he had studied a lot about Upanishad. And, he was a very generous minded person, and we got even Upanishads translated into Persian, that he wanted the Upanishadic knowledge to spread even across Persia. That is what we know. Professor Saab has done a lot of exhaustive studies on it. So let us try to get enlightened from him on both KHUSRAW as well as DARA SHIKOH. Yes, Professor Saab, your take on this, please.
Amir Khusro was a great personality. I've worked on him and published books. One book was Amir Khusro's India. And one of his contribution is that from civilizational and national point of view from India, for Indians, that he is probably the first poet and the last poet also who described the whole India as a nation and described the different aspects of India. He composed a magnum opus called No Separe, 9 heavens or 9 skies, in which he describes different aspects of Indian civilization, its flora and fauna, its languages, people, different regions, languages, pandits, and he says that the first time in the Semitic tradition, as we know, that Adam was in heaven and he was sent to earth, and Amir Khusro says he was sent to India because India was the only place which was identical to the heaven. So that shows his love for the his birthplace, his country, and he was one of the greatest Persian poets of Indian origin, and means one of the greatest. He after even 7-8 centuries he is considered, and he composed divans and many things that are celebrated. I won't go into the details of it. He was also a great musician who synthesized Persian as well as the Indian music. And even today, all the musicians are grateful to him. And he is also considered the founder of Hindi, or whatever we call that, Hindustani or Urdu language, and introduce it to the level of the literature. And he's one of the founders. And he celebrates Indian knowledge tradition also in his writings. He was expert of Sanskrit as well. Coming down to Dara SHIKOH, and that tradition was always continued. Dara SHIKOH was like many other scholars of that time, but he took keen interest into the books, old Sanskrit books, and he discussed with Pandits of Banaras. When he became the governor of Banaras and Allahabad, he invited them to Delhi. And after discussing, he realized that Upanishad was the source of great knowledge, particularly about the concept of God. Because in Quran, there is concept of the monotheism, and he was in search of some texts from the Indian tradition. And then he found Upanishad, and he was greatly involved. And he was also a Sanskrit scholar, and he, with the help of the Pandits of Banaras, translated it into Persian. And it was named as Sirrul Asrar or Sirre Akbar, means the greatest secret or the secret of the secrets. And he also wrote one book, Majmaul Bahrain, means the mingling of two oceans. And these two oceans were Sanatan and Islam. So he is probably the first person who, in a way, introduced the comparative religion that later the Western people, and he is the first person who introduced through his translation the Indian knowledge tradition, particularly the Sanskrit tradition, to the West. Because this Upanishad translation in Persian was international language at that time, and it went to the West, and then it was translated into Latin and French by Dupron. And then we know that the founder of the Indology and modern philosophy, Schopenhauer, took it, and he was so much influenced by this translation of DARA SHIKOH. Later, even in his writing, the Raja Ram Mohan Rai acknowledges the contribution of DARA SHIKOH. So he was, to me, a continuation of the same knowledge tradition as I mentioned, and this was prevalent generally at that time. I have recently wrote one monograph on DARA SHIKOH that is being published by the Ministry of Culture, CCRT, and basically for the common readers and the students, school students. But I'm again working how he contributed the dialogues between the traditions and the different faiths that has been an Indian tradition. And I think when it will be published, it will be some interest of the academics.
It's so nice that you have given us an adequate idea about DARA SHIKOH and of course AMIR KHUSRAW. Now I'm coming to because we are coming to the end of the program. I would like to ask you viewers, please take a note of this very important fact that Professor Sahab has already written 20 books and got 100 research papers published to his name. I'm coming to a very important next question. You also have published poem collection Sarur and Namaz is in Persian. Could you please elaborate on both, please? Yes, Professor Sahab.
I write poetry in both the languages, Urdu, Hindi, and Persian. And I am one of the few Persian poets also recognized by Iranians and countries of the Persian-speaking world. And they recently published a collection of my Persian poetry. It is titled as Namaz-e-Ishq. And I have published my Urdu poetry that is called as Surur in 2014. And during this, and one in Nagari script, Sochne Pe Pehra Hai. And then during the last 2 years particularly, I have written a lot, around 400 pages. I was mostly indulged into and involved into poetry. And I'm going to publish 2 collections, one of ghazals and another of poems. So that was also a blessing in disguise, I can say, that I could involve and transcendent into the creative part. I could search it. So that is what, and that will be published soon. For first my poems collection and then my ghazals collection.
Thanks a lot, Professor Sahab. Actually, it's so nice. We still have few questions left, but I'm so very sorry because we do have a time constant, time limiting factor. My dear viewers, today we have had a wonderful session on Indo-Persian relationship, and that too from an expert who has already done an extensive and exhaustive research on this particular topic. He has enlightened all of us on Indo-Persian relations, on DARA, SHIKOH, AMIR, KHUSRAW, and so many different as architectural commonality between between India and other parts of Central Asia. That is, architectural bounding was also a very played a pivotal role in terms of developing cohesiveness between India and its neighbors. My dear viewers, today, as Professor Saab also paid a glowing tribute to education, the goddess of education, Mother Saraswati, I would like to quote here a very, very important verse from Chandogya Upanishad. That is, Astoma Shadgamaya, Tamsoma Jyotirgamaya, Mrityoma Amritasgamaya. That is from from darkness to light, from untruth to truth, and from death to immortality. That is the exact meaning of education as it is envisaged in Upanishad, about which the Dr. Saab, our esteemed guest, has so loftily described as to how Dara SHIKOH evinces such a huge, colossal amount of interest in terms of getting Upanishad translated into Persia, because he was always on the lookout for for the enrichment of his knowledge. And knowledge comes from assimilation. Let us not develop the sort of mindset that we are the supreme, we know everything. Let us not feign our omniscience, or that is what we understand everything, we know everything. Let us not be omniscient. We always have to keep on learning from others, and so long as the process of exchange of ideas and knowledge goes in tandem with each other, we will continue to enrich ourselves. So my dear viewers, we have had wonderful session, and this education pe charcha, you all know, is just a mechanism to spread education across the nation, and this is what for this platform has been founded. And today you have seen that we keep on inviting I would like to make a very important announcement here, my dear viewers. Our next guest on next Saturday, that is 12th, we have a senior IAS officer, one of the topmost educationists of this country, Dr. Anil Swarupji, who himself was secretary to the school, government of India in schooling and in literacy department. Preceding to that, he held a very important portfolio of being a coal secretary to the coal ministry of the government of India. So Dr. Shri Anil Swarupji is going to be a distinguished and esteemed guest on coming Saturday. But today, my dear viewers, we have had Dr. Akhlaque Sahab, a very, very renowned and very esteemed professor of Jawaharlal Nehru University, with whom I was interacting on myriad issues and dimensions of Indo-Persian relations, and so many collateral issues which were involved within the kaleidoscopic perspective of our today's interaction. So my dear viewers, keep watching it today. Since our you can say our partner, Dr. Shri Surendra Pathak ji, is little preoccupied with some other activity. So he had already informed me that he would not be able to translate our conversation into Hindi. So that is why, I express my regret, my apology that, today's conversation, the transcript of today's conversation could not be translated into Hindi, could not be summed up rather in Hindi because of Dr. Surendra Pathak ji's, unavailability. But nevertheless, today's session was a very scintillating one, was very, very enlightening one. I thank our, esteemed guest, Professor Dr. Akhlaque Sahab for illuminating today's Education Pe Charcha, which coincided on such an auspicious occasion where the entire nation or universe is paying, its glowing tribute, its reverential salutations to the goddess of learning, that is Mother, our divine Mother Saraswati. So with these words, we will keep on enlightening you, we will keep on educating the nation. I once again thank Dr. Akhlaque Sahab from the core of my heart for blessing and blessing today's session on Education Pe Charcha. With these, I return you back to our back again with a commitment to return once again at 7 p.m. on next Saturday with another distinguished guest, Dr. Shri Anil Swarupji, a senior IS officer. So thanks to all of you.
Indeed, and namaskar and adab to everyone.
And blessed, and looking forward to interaction, continuous interaction. Thanks. Thanks, Sabyaji. You want to say anything, Dr. Saab?
Thanks indeed. Thanks a lot.
Thanks a lot. Thanks. See you again.